On August 16, 1977, the world lost a legend, Elvis Presley, the king of rock. But before his life came to an end, a strange sensation overtook his daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, the night before. She knew something was wrong, and she wasn't the only one. Peggy Lipton, Elvis's ex-girlfriend, also shared secrets that, over time, began to make more sense than ever. But what really happened that fateful night? You will discover everything now. Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis Presley's only daughter, had always shared a deep connection with her father, marked by moments of joy as well as great concern. The night before Elvis's death, on August 16, 1977, is a moment that remains alive in Lisa's memory, as she intuitively felt that something was wrong. Even as a child, she had a keener perception than any adult around her, sensing that death was approaching. At the time, Lisa Marie was only 9 years old, but already had an emotionally developed understanding of her father's life. Elvis, although a global icon and revered as the king of rock, was silently battling his own body and substance dependence. In several interviews later on, Lisa mentioned that, despite her young age, she felt her father wasn't well, not only physically, but emotionally. Elvis had struggled for years with his prescription drug addiction, which led to a weakened health. Over the years, Lisa Marie witnessed her father in moments of extreme fatigue, discomfort, and even erratic behavior. But despite this, he continued to be the icon the world knew. For Lisa, these images of a weak and vulnerable father stood in stark contrast to the powerful and charismatic public figure Elvis projected. She shared that, on the night before his death, she had a feeling that something serious was about to happen. Lisa Marie said goodbye to Elvis the night before with a simple "good night," a farewell that over time she understood as a final goodbye. She described how this feeling of alertness, of something wrong about to occur, was like a premonition she couldn't fully interpret at the time. What makes this experience even more intriguing is Lisa Marie's connection to Elvis's health. As a daughter, she saw her father suffering in a very intimate way. She often spoke of the anguish she felt watching Elvis battle addiction and the loneliness he experienced, even surrounded by fans and admirers. Lisa knew, more than anyone, that her father was at a critical point in his life, in a constant battle with his weakened health. As the years passed, Lisa reflected on her relationship with her father and the impact of his premature death on her life. She mentioned that, although it was difficult to cope with Elvis's loss, the premonition she had before his death seemed to be part of something larger, an invisible bond between father and daughter. This feeling was not just a simple hunch, but a perception of something inevitable, something she felt inside her in an inexplicable way. Elvis's death was unexpected for many, but for Lisa Marie, who had such a deep emotional connection with him, the pieces began to fall into place more clearly over time. She shared that she always had a spiritual connection with her father, something she felt more intensely after his death. This intuition of Lisa about what was to come is a fascinating aspect of Elvis's death story, as it reveals not only the pain of a daughter losing her father, but also an emotional and spiritual connection that transcended time and space. Lisa Marie's sensitivity about Elvis's death was a recurring theme in her later interviews. She never doubted her intuition, even though she was so young at the time. For her, there was something more behind her perception that something was wrong, something that connected her directly to her father's death. And this connection remains to this day as one of the most mysterious and moving aspects of Elvis Presley's story and his daughter, Lisa Marie. The relationship between Elvis Presley and Peggy Lipton, although not the most publicized in its time, played a significant role in the singer's life, particularly in terms of his emotional and physical health. Peggy, an actress famous for the TV series The Mod Squad and a cultural icon of the 1960s, had a brief but intense romance with Elvis in the 1970s. This relationship became, over time, one of the lesser-known stories of Presley's life, but one that revealed facets of the man behind the myth. Elvis and Peggy met at the height of both of their fame. He was already a rock and movie legend, and she was rising as a TV star. The social context of the time, marked by counterculture, sexual revolution, and political tensions, made their relationship a true representation of the eccentric and free lifestyle of Hollywood's elite, where sex, drugs, and excess were often the norm. Both shared the stress of living under the spotlight, and that created a bond between them. Despite his fame, Elvis was far from immune to the weight of his public life. He was at a critical point in his career, facing a series of health problems that included insomnia, excessive medication use, and increasing depression. Peggy Lipton, on the other hand, was a mature woman who was aware of the inner pain Elvis carried. She was one of the few to notice the silent battle the King of Rock was facing every day. Peggy reported in interviews that, during the time she was with Elvis, she was struck by his emotional and physical fragility. Elvis was not only the spectacular artist the world knew, he was also a deeply troubled man, carrying an immense emotional burden. Peggy noticed that Elvis was sinking into his own addictions, which showed in his erratic behavior and frequent health setbacks. She spoke openly about how he showed vulnerability during their relationship, something people rarely saw due to the immaculate public image Elvis always maintained. What makes Elvis's relationship with Peggy Lipton even more interesting is the impact it had on her personal and professional life. Lipton was one of the first women to attempt to understand the man behind the fame and express concern about Elvis's health and emotional issues. She described him as a charismatic man, but insecure and often in crisis. Peggy also spoke of the loneliness Elvis faced, even when surrounded by people and fans. This feeling of loneliness was deeply rooted in his life, and for Lipton, it was one of the hardest things to deal with in their relationship. Although the romance was brief, the impact Peggy Lipton had on Elvis's life was noticeable. She was one of the few women who could get close to him without being overshadowed by his fame. She had a unique way of dealing with his emotional complexity, something Elvis seemed to appreciate. But despite the closeness, Elvis never managed to free himself from his inner demons. Their relationship ended, but the mark of that relationship is still visible in Peggy's memories, who never forgot the lessons she learned from Elvis about loneliness and suffering. Peggy also closely observed the change in Elvis's behavior as the years went by. His deteriorating health was not just a reflection of excessive substance use, but also of a life marked by a lack of emotional balance. Peggy was one of the few to witness Elvis's difficulties in a way that others, like his family and close friends, often preferred to ignore. This made her realize quite early on that Elvis's life was nearing a tragic end, and the choices he was making were putting his health at risk. What is known today, based on Peggy Lipton's interviews and memories, is that she was not just a passing love in Elvis's life, but someone who truly knew him in his entirety. She understood his vulnerabilities, his pain, and the constant struggle he faced to maintain his public image while sinking into his internal issues. This aspect of their relationship, far from being just another celebrity romance, reveals the emotional complexity of one of the greatest stars of the 20th century. The relationship between Elvis Presley and Peggy Lipton, although fleeting, was essential to understanding the man behind the legend. Instead of just being a moment of passion or fun, it was a space for emotional support that revealed a darker, more human side of Elvis. Their connection, although brief, is a reminder that no matter how admired or idolized someone may be, we all face our own internal battles. And in Elvis's case, those battles were deep, silent, and, unfortunately, often ignored by those around him. Elvis Presley's death in 1977 was an event that not only shook the music world, but also left an indelible mark on the life of his only daughter, Lisa Marie Presley. For Lisa, losing her father meant not only the death of an icon, but the loss of a deep and emotional bond. Her relationship with Elvis was complex and marked by a combination of unconditional love, constant grief, and a search for her own identity under the shadow of one of the biggest pop culture icons. From a very young age, Lisa Marie was forced to deal with the weight of her fame. Growing up at Graceland, the massive mansion in Memphis, she didn't have a typical childhood.
Her life was constantly invaded by the presence of the media, public curiosity, and the expectation of living up to a name that represented American culture. However, this pressure did not come with its own emotional challenges. Lisa Marie grew up with a father deeply affected by his own internal struggles, including his addiction to prescription drugs and a series of health issues. These difficulties, far from being just personal issues of Elvis, also directly affected Lisa's relationship with him.
Although still very young, Lisa witnessed Elvis's decline, not only physically but emotionally. She saw the man behind the legend, a man who, despite being adored by millions, was constantly battling his own demons. The memories Lisa has of her father are far from those of an iconic performer. Instead, they are of a man weakened, whose struggle to maintain his king image was ongoing. For Lisa, this meant growing up with a much different view of Elvis, one that fans and the media often couldn't perceive. Lisa's relationship with Elvis's death was, therefore, marked by a complicated mourning. She was confronted at a young age with the death of an extremely important figure in her life, something most children wouldn't face until much later. Elvis's death was not only a personal loss, it also meant the collapse of what Lisa knew as safety and emotional stability. With her father's death, Lisa was forced to mature quickly, but the grieving process was long and painful. In the years following Elvis's death, Lisa Marie had to cope with a whirlwind of emotions, which included not only the pain of losing her father, but also the challenge of understanding her own identity as Elvis Presley's daughter. The pressure to live up to his legacy without being defined by it was something Lisa had to confront throughout her life. This quest for her own identity became a recurring theme in her adult life. Lisa tried to distance herself from the public figure of Elvis, striving to be seen as an artist on her own merits, but the weight of her father's legacy was always present. Elvis's death also exposed her to a series of emotional and mental health struggles. Lisa Marie went through difficult periods, including substance abuse, which she admitted to in interviews over the years. In many ways, her fight against addiction can be seen as an attempt to cope with the pain, not only from losing Elvis, but also from the difficulties of growing up under the constant pressure of being the daughter of the King of Rock. The pain of losing her father was not alleviated by her fame, but often intensified, as Lisa felt she would always have to live up to the expectations of the public. Over the years, Lisa Marie tried to preserve Elvis's memory and the legacy he left behind, not just as a musician, but as a man. She was an advocate for preserving Graceland, the home that became synonymous with Elvis, and dedicated much of her time and effort to keeping her father's name alive. Her struggle, however, was always an internal one, between honoring Elvis's legacy and trying to establish a path for herself. Lisa Marie Presley's death in 2023 at the age of 54 brought to light not only the pain of losing a daughter, but also the continuation of a family legacy marked by tragedy and resilience. Lisa was never able to escape fully from her father's shadow, and this was evident in her personal and professional life. Her premature death, especially considering the loss of her son Benjamin Cow in 2020, led many to reflect on what Elvis Presley's legacy really was, a story of great success and immense suffering. Lisa Marie Presley's legacy is intertwined not only with her father's music, but also with the complex issues of identity, grief, and mental health she faced throughout her life. Her relationship with Elvis's death, which began with a sense of early loss, was marked by the constant struggle to balance her own identity with the heritage he left behind. She did everything she could to be seen for her own merits, but the memory of her father was always there, shaping her life in ways she couldn't control. The tragic end of Lisa Marie Presley, like her father's, marks the end of an era of internal struggles and uncontrollable external forces. Her legacy, therefore, is not just that of Elvis Presley's daughter, but also of a woman who tirelessly tried to find her own path while dealing with the weight of a legacy she did not choose. And ultimately, her death brought to light the sad truth that, despite all the success, power, and fame, some family shadows are impossible to escape. And so we come to the end of this journey.
where we explored not only the life and death of Elvis Presley, but also the complex emotions and legacies of his daughter, Lisa Marie Presley. A story marked by love, grief, and the relentless search for identity. More than icons, they are human figures with their pains, triumphs, and, above all, a connection that transcends time. If this video touched you in any way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more fascinating stories like this. Activate the notifications so you don't miss any exclusive content about the world of music, celebrities, and unforgettable legacies. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and share it with your friends so more people can discover this moving story. What do you think about Lisa Marie's relationship with her father and the legacy she left behind? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Until the next video, and thank you for being part of this journey with us.